Welcome to the Fantasy Football Forge. I'm Steve, and welcome to the Saturday show. Well, Thursday night was pretty easy to recap. Just burn it all down. Both teams, just what a weird game. And go on to like the Reddit NFL forum if you want to get every little piece of information about that game and all the oddities so far this season, especially when talking about the Denver Broncos. So that's the recap there. Indianapolis has had the injury bug hit them pretty hard now. Their offensive line is in shambles. Maybe in some areas for the better. I was watching an Indianapolis live feed on YouTube, some streamers from Indianapolis, and just in general, the commentary seemed to be a little bit better in favor of the center, at least, replacement. So I don't know, or at least maybe the guy not playing where he was previously on the O-line. So maybe they'll find a groove with the new guys, but the pieces in Indianapolis are a little bit shaky going forward for now, and of course Denver does not seem to have found their groove. So let's just get on to the injury report, and then that will be followed up by my steals, stock, and scraps portion, which is sort of like a start-sit, comparing my rankings to the ECR rankings, looking for the guys that I have outside of starter territory that ECR has inside of it, and the opposite. And then the stock portion is just looking at narratives that we want to trust or not trust is the general idea of it. You know, stick with the guy even though he's had a couple of rough weeks, those types of things, because I think you should. Each position's steal, stock, and scraps is bookmarked down below or time-stamped. You can always skip to those if you would like to skip over the injury report, but we'll just quick rush through this and any major ones to consider. So just for the quarterbacks, the players out, of course, Tua, and then Jameis Winston was ruled out again. Dak Prescott. Mac Jones not ruled out yet. He is still doubtful. So if he were to play, I would knock back Damian Harris from Andre Stevenson just a little bit in my rankings. Still a great matchup there, but you would want to push up some of the Jacoby Myers, maybe Nelson Aguilar, probably more of a DFS thing there, and Devontae Parker as well would get, would be higher up by a little ways. Their ceilings are actually pretty darn nice in this game, so if we have a quarterback in there that we can trust, that would be good for those weapons. As far as Andy Dalton goes, I actually did not switch him out with Jameis Winston. As far as my rankings go, he stayed in the exact same spot. The positives and the negatives of his numbers just kind of evened things out. And for Dak Prescott, I guess for Cooper Rush, he's starting again. Dak is still a wait and see for the running backs. DeAndre Swift was ruled out yesterday, and Cordarrelle Patterson was put on the IR earlier in the week. As far as questionable players, Alvin Kamara is still questionable, has not been designated to play for sure. And David Montgomery did practice 3 days in a row, but here's a little bit of a quote after he got put in as questionable at the end of the week. So things were looking like a potential David Montgomery start, and then, of course, that throws a wrench into the Khalil Herbert owners' plans, even the David Montgomery owners' plans. So a little quote from the coach at the end of the week here yesterday about David Montgomery. I think he's listed as doubtful. Oh, questionable? After he shifted through his papers looking at his designations on the players. Oh, questionable? So that's good. Yeah, we'll see. So the fact that the coach doesn't seem very, very highly likely that David Montgomery will play, and so that keeps things simple. But in the event that David Montgomery were to play, and keeping that quote in mind, I'm going to ignore what I had originally wrote in here about a back-end RB2 and a back-end RB3, and just say that they would both be high-end flex options just due to an even increased certainty about the amount of usage based on what the coach had thought on what his status was. And then Tony Pollard is also questionable, but that just really comes down to an illness, so I'm expecting that he will be available. Obviously, Ezekiel Elliott would have to be moved up into, I think I have him around 30 right now, so he would just become borderline starting material for a 2 running back league. As far as the wide receivers go, this list is nice and long. So out all the wide receivers that you think of for the most part when it comes to the Giants. Jahan Dotson, we knew that. Traylon Burks, we know that. Rashad Bateman was ruled out yesterday. Michael Thomas was ruled out yesterday. Keenan Allen, finally, that was confirmed. It looks like he re-aggravated something in, I think, the Wednesday practice. May not be good for his long-term coming back all the sooner anymore. And then DJ Shark was also ruled out. There are still question marks with the other Lions wide receivers like Amon-Ra St. Brown and Josh Reynolds here are both still questionable. It is looking more likely than not. It's looking positive in the case of Amon-Ra St. Brown, and I don't think Josh Reynolds has really been too questionable as far as whether he'll be available. If all of those weapons were to be out, I do think you have to drop Jared Goff out of at least where I have him ranked further back. So look for changes Sunday morning based on any updates there. Then Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill are questionable. Jalen Waddle is probably likely to play. Tyreek Hill came up with a quad, I think, in Thursday's practice. There's an interesting quote out there from Mike McDaniel about his status, just saying he's 100% sure that Tyreek Hill will play or will not play. Things are looking. I would be prepared to be without Tyreek Hill. And one good option, you probably don't have to go this risky in any of your in your regular redraft leagues, but Cedric Wilson would be an interesting play. He was pretty darn good over in Dallas, and he was the reason that I had Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill a little bit further back in my preseason rankings, thinking he would suck up some targets. He's been out a good portion of the season so far, but he, I believe, is back in full health this week, so that would be an interesting guy, especially for like a DFS reasoning. Then Curtis Samuel is questionable there, and he's a good start this week if he's playing. Isaiah McKenzie got out of the red shirt yesterday at practice, so that means that he was able to be contacted in practice, which is probably a good sign for someone with a concussion that they're allowed to have contact in practice. So I would think that he will probably be going. T. Higgins came up questionable late in the week. I recall correctly. Julio Jones is still questionable to start or not. Zay Jones is expected to play. Hunter Renfrow was at practice this week, trending up. Looks like he'll be playing. Of course, they have not said for sure that he will be. Jacoby Myers, questionable. Jarvis Landry, questionable. Josh Palmer, questionable. In the event that Josh Palmer does not go, I wouldn't feel any real worse for the wear playing Justin Herbert. He's done well with some of his back-end roster weapons there, and with Eckler, it doesn't have the same effect on that offense as it might others, but Eckler would, hey, in case you were thinking of sitting him for some weird reason this week, he'd be a go. And then Rondale Moore is a game-time decision. I think he came up with a new injury earlier on in the week or over from last weekend's games. Then onto the tight ends. Cameron Brate was ruled out with that concussion. Kyle Pitts out. Dawson Knox out. Jonnu Smith has not been ruled out yet, but he is doubtful. And questionable guys, Logan Thomas is questionable. I believe there was a quote from the coach that they're expecting him to play. TJ Hawkinson, questionable. He should be good to go. Gerald Everett and Hayden Hurst, also questionable. Gerald Everett, at least, I think was later week one, so keep an eye on that. Then you might hurt Justin Herbert's stock if he and Joshua Palmer were out and Keenan Allen. But once again, there's just so many question marks at the quarterback position right now that I think you just trust your guy. Moving on to the steal, stock, and scrap portion of this video. Let's get going. We're going to start with the tight ends. Just a heads up, the rankings for this really only matters for the tight end and quarterback rankings are rest of week rankings, so they are not the rankings that I would have had pre-Thursday game is all that I'm getting at. And then this week I did provide some what I'll call DFS value plays, just basically looking for the lowest priced, highest ceiling guy that I could find based on my projections. That is based on the FanDuel pricing for this week at least. In regards to the tight end position, I have the same top 12 as the ECR's top 12 in different order and everything, but they are the same. So there weren't any true steals here or true scraps to provide for you. But I know that just because there are 12 viable guys, or 12 must-starts based on my rankings and the ECR, that doesn't mean that those are evenly dispersed throughout the league. You may not have those players. So we're going to start out the steals with Cade Otton here, Tampa Bay's tight end. I have him ranked at 18. The ECR on him is 36. Yes, I am quite aggressive with that, and I do not rank literally every single tight end. Once we get into those back-end tight ends, it's more guys that I'm keeping eyes on. And with Cameron Brate going out, I definitely wanted to see what Cade Otton, how his projections looked like. So he was in there. Tom Brady and that offense, I think, is going to be starting to turn a corner this week, going up against Atlanta. Definitely not a hard matchup. It's a good matchup for tight ends. And we know how Tom Brady can utilize the tight end position. Cade Otton pretty much was my favorite target, I guess, for my team, the Green Bay Packers, at tight end. Really liked him coming out. He's a rookie this year. So I think there's a lot of potential there, but that would be a super risky play for... You'd have to be very desperate to go there in a redraft league. So he is more of a DFS value play, but I ended up having doing that later, coming up with those names for that after creating my steals, stock, and scraps, and then I wanted to mention one other one, so just left him here. There are two more steals, Logan Thomas and Evan Ingram, and at the 13th and 14th spot in my rankings, ECR in them are 16 and 18. So just wanted to point out that I do have those two as my top two replacement options this week if you are looking for some help at tight end this week. Logan Thomas is going up against Tennessee, not a terrible matchup, and Evan Ingram is going up against Houston, not as good of a matchup as it sounds like just by hearing the name Houston, but I do expect that to be a good game, or there to be a lot of potential for a good game there for Evan Ingram this week. Moving on to the stock portion for the tight ends, starting out with George Kittle, expecting a little bit of a squeaky Kittle week for him. George Kittle, I have in at the my 10th ranked player. The ECR on him is 8. And if you drafted Kittle, you have to deal with the bad to get the good. He has a ceiling as high as anything, and his floor is just like every other tight end due to how much they use him in the blocking game. He's only being started in 67% of leagues, so I just wanted to emphasize that he's up there as far as starting tight ends go, although George Kittle owning teams are probably the teams that might have a Gerald Everett or a Tyler Higbee, in which case I do have them ranked higher than him, so understandable. Going up against Carolina this week, so I think I like this week for George Kittle, but couldn't really rank him any higher. Then David Njoku, I have in at my 8th spot. He is only being started by 35% of his owners. The ECR has him in at 11, so I have him 3 spots higher than ECR. Going up against the Chargers, like that matchup, should be a lot of opportunities there, especially the healthier those Chargers questionable players are, the better for the amount of opportunities that Cleveland will have to throw the ball, I would say. And this is a red hot matchup according to my temperature gauge for David Njoku. So, given my trust to him once again this week, but the moment he doesn't have a great matchup, he shouldn't be making it this high. Then into the scraps portion, really digging down here. So Robert Tonyan, I have in at 19th. The ECR on him is 13. The thing about the Packers is there really is a focus on the run game, and they have better run blocking tight ends than Robert Tonyan. He's not a terrible run blocker, but people keep expecting his usage to go up, and it has gone up some, but it's not skyrocketing, and I don't think that is due to any lingering health concerns for Robert Tonyan. I think that is due to the where this team is at and the fact that the focus is more so on the run game. Now, Aaron Rodgers has expressed hey, I'm going to retire if these wide receivers don't get their butts in gear. So maybe they start forcing the pass game to work, but I want to see it before anything else. The usage is just too low for me with Tanyan. Going up against the New York Giants, that's another one of those matchups that it sounds better than it actually is. It's a lukewarm matchup though, so in the end, not the absolute worst week to play Robert Tanyan. I just have others higher than him. And then Hayden Hurst right behind him and at 20, a couple behind in the ECR at 15. So I'm about 5 spots too low on him, according to the ECR. And going up against Baltimore, this matchup is as cold as ice. It's not a good one for Hayden Hurst. It's just going to come down to does he get a touchdown or not. Ceiling's really definitely not there in this week. And my DFS play for Baltimore, for the tight end position, is Isaiah Likely of Baltimore. With Rashad Bateman out, I see a world where Isaiah Likely gets quite a bit more usage. He's a cheap DFS value play. So if you want to save money at the tight end position, you could go with Isaiah Likely, or Cade Otton is another one I like. I like Cade more. I think that's more secure of a spot. Moving on to the quarterbacks in the steals spot. Ooh, going bold here. I have Zach Wilson ranked too highly. He's in at 10. This just comes down to a litany of quarterbacks who have not performed well. We had 2 of them in this last game. That, like, how can I put them very high up in my rankings between Matt Ryan and what's his cook? Russ is cooking. So until those guys can come out of their shells, if they will, I have to continue to trust some of the people who've actually performed up to a certain level. Zach Wilson, as iffy as any. ECR on him is 19. I am the highest on him this week, going up against Miami. Now, if Tyreek Hill but especially if both of them were out this week for Miami, with Teddy Bridgewater being the starter at quarterback, not going to expect that offense to be as efficient as it has been. And at that point, the number of snaps for Zach Wilson, the amount of passing plays to rushing plays, don't expect to work in his favor, and don't expect efficiency to be the primary reason that Zach Wilson would be a starter this week. Zach Wilson is a desperation play. He is not highly owned, less than 10%, so I'm not telling you to go out there and take Zach Wilson and use him this week. What I am saying is if you're desperate, there's a light at the end of the tunnel there. Have Zach Wilson pretty highly ranked. He would be a good option this week, especially, once again, actually only if both Tyreek Hill and Waddle are playing. Otherwise, I really don't want to touch that. Then Jared Goff, I have ranked at number 9, 1 spot higher. The ECR in him is 14. I believe that's a little too low there. Going against New England, though, so they're not expecting the Jared Goff that we've seen most weeks this year, or is it every week even, just due to the amount of opportunities. And this is also a little bit, I don't know how far I can drop these guys back, though, but things could change if Amon-Ra St. Brown's not healthy, and if Josh Reynolds were not healthy, especially. Moving on to the stocks, Matt Stafford in at 21, only being started by 25% of his owners, and the ECR in him is 14. So neither the ECR or myself has him in that must-start territory, and I'm here to just reinforce what most Matt Stafford owners are aware of. You cannot trust this guy, especially going up against Dallas. They can get after the quarterback. I don't expect this to be the week that the Rams offense turns it around, at least not to a level where you'll just totally regret not playing him. You should at least get something comparable from a lot of those other starting options at the very least. That is if he has a decent week at the very least. So not expecting some huge, massive week that you would be upset that you missed out on, even if they start to turn things around there in Los Angeles. But I do expect them to turn things around eventually, especially once Van Jefferson's back. I think that will help open things up for that offense. Then Derek Carr, I have ranked at 6. The ECR in him is 9, and he's only being started by 30%, in 30% of leagues, going up against Kansas City there. The ceiling's insane, is essentially what it comes down to. Now, offensive lineman did go down there in Las Vegas, one that they just traded for and did well in his first week for them. So that sucks. Regardless, there's a reason the experts have him as a starter this week. Trust him. Just go with it. Shut off your brain that he hasn't been great so far this season and trust it. Moving on to the scraps. For Kirk Cousins, I have him ranked at 22, and the ECR in him is 10, going up against Chicago this week. Another one of those names where it looks good because Chicago, the Bears suck, right? Well, their defense isn't that bad, and this Vikings offense hasn't given us much hope so far this season. Another offense I do think will get things turned around, but especially given the opponent's offense there in Chicago, I would expect, if anything, the run game will be what really racks up the fantasy points. I don't think you're missing out on too much if you start one of those not so pretty names over Kirk Cousins this week, and I would advise it. Then Aaron Rodgers I have at 17th. The ECR is 11. I think these guys are just getting up there based on name value and based on the types of people that you would have to put above them, like the Zach Wilsons and the Jared Goffs. It doesn't feel good. But I'm not here to tell you what you want to hear. I'm here to tell you what the numbers are telling you so far this season, and we'll work forward from there. So Aaron Rodgers going up against New York Giants, I would feel a little better about this, but they're playing in London. Just don't expect it to be a very pretty game. Don't expect this to be the game where the Green Bay offense is hitting on all cylinders. Now, they may look good, but that'll be through the rushing attack, if anything, in my opinion. And the DFS play here is Teddy Bridgewater. If those weapons are healthy, Tua, Tyreek, and Waddle, especially, they do a lot of the work after the catch. Teddy Bridgewater's a fine quarterback. The cost of playing him this week and the ceiling potential is very much worth it as a nice value play in DFS. We're moving on to the running back position in the steals. We're starting off with Devin Singletary. I have him ranked 20th. The ECR in him is 26, so just out of that starting territory. I think he's a must-start this week going up against Pitt. It's been a pretty friendly matchup so far. We'll reevaluate that when they get TJ Watt back, but until then, not a bad option there. Really like Devin Singletary this week to continue what he's been doing. Trust him. Then Kareem Hunt, I have at 25. Pretty much the rest of the top 24, I was in agreement with the ECR. There are 20-something running backs that are basically you have to start them, and then after that it just starts to fall off a cliff. So Kareem Hunt, I have at 25. ECR is 29. 4 spots higher than the ECR. Going up against the Chargers should be a lot of opportunity. There's a decent chance that the Chargers are clicking and force a game script from Cleveland where Kareem Hunt would be a little bit more valuable than he's been in some weeks recently. He's just a guy that I like this week, and the matchup's good, and my projections liked him a fair bit this week as well. The only caveat, once again, will be if Gerald Everett and Palmer were both to be out this week, then the game flow starts to look a little less friendly for Kareem Hunt. Otherwise, he's a good option this week. Very, very high-end flex. Then for the stocks, Khalil Herbert, assuming David Montgomery doesn't play, I have him ranked very highly, 7th. The ECR in him is 16, going up against Minnesota. Chicago runs the ball. That's what they do. They do it pretty darn well, and don't expect that to change. And Khalil Herbert gets more of the workload than David Montgomery when David Montgomery's there, and Khalil Herbert's there. So, only being started in 27% of leagues, I'm here to say if you have him on your roster, you should find a way, almost certainly, to get him to play. At the very least, he's a super good, if you have some good, trustworthy running backs that you're not going to sit, he should be in your flex, almost certainly there. Other stack options here, both of the New England running backs, Damian Harris and Ramondre Stevenson, especially if Mac Jones isn't playing. I have them ranked 19th and 20th. They're being started in 46 and 40% of leagues, respectively. And the ECR on them is almost the same as what I have. Going up against Detroit, it's an excellent matchup. Expect New England to run the ball. Their smash plays this week, give them your trust. This starting percentage is too low as of Friday night. Then moving on to the scraps for the running backs. James Conner, I have ranked at 28. The ECR in him is 22 going up against Philadelphia. It's not a good matchup. It's also not a good matchup. Don't like that. So these were the best options that I had for scraps. Apparently, I don't even recall exactly what I wanted to say about them compared to like the ECR or anything, but Jeff Wilson, Najee Harris, I believe not excellent matchups for them. Just borderline starter guys. Still have them in that starter territory, but borderline. I'm expecting, I think I have them just behind what the ECRs are on each of them, is all that is. Then for the DFS value play, I ended up going with Tyler Algier because he was the lowest cost and maybe not quite the highest ceiling, but weighing things out, had a very low cost for the ceiling that I have projected for him, and I didn't even give him, I don't believe, any insane amount of usage this week. So, but it is a very rough matchup. Is the issue. Devin Singletary, Ramondre Stevenson, in this order, Kareem Hunt, and Breece Hall, I think are also all very good prices for what they might be giving you this week. So, other names to have there. Moving on to the wide receivers here to finish things up. Starting off with the steals and Isaiah McKenzie, I have ranked 39th. The ECR on him is 62nd, and that has been trending down. He started up quite a bit higher, maybe around in the 40s even earlier in the week. Gabe Davis is coming back. Going up against Pittsburgh once again, that's been a good matchup, even a better matchup up through the air. And so I think Isaiah McKenzie is a really, really good flex option to have this week. Not advising that you force him into your lineup by any means, but especially if you're in a 3 wide receiver league, he's up there as in a flex conversation. I like him this week. That's all it comes down to. Then Devin Duvernay, I have ranked 34th. ECR on him is 50th, and that was trending up with the Rashad Bateman news. I had already moved him up, but not everybody has gotten to that. Oh, that was another issue with Isaiah McKenzie. Part of the reason that he's been trending down is just he hasn't really been cleared as a starter this week, so I think some people maybe even really took him off of their ranking charts, but I believe as of Friday that it looks like he's going to play. So obviously this is dependent on if Isaiah McKenzie even plays at all, but if he were to play, I would assume he would shoot up in several people's rankings. Maybe not this high, but he would shoot up. Then Devin Duvernay going up against Cincinnati, potentially high-scoring matchup, will be the de facto number 1 wide receiver, not even receiving option in that offense. I'm not super excited about him. I said in my rankings videos that if Rashad Bateman were to be ruled out, I wouldn't be shooting Duvernay up in my rankings. He did end up going jumping more spots than I had expected, but when I just looked at some of the names, this is where he ended up jumping to. But he's not a wide receiver 1. I don't expect things to be easy for him. I do expect this offense to maybe turn to that run a little bit more. Maybe bring in a wrinkle there with Isaiah Likely. He is a high upside flex option still. He is not a must start for me is all, but we did have that difference there. So wanted to point that out if you're setting your lineups that he's based on ECR, he's trending up but he's not immediately noticeable. So expect that to go higher. Then for these stocks, Romeo Doubs and Alan Lazard, I have in at ranked. I don't know when I became the high guy on Green Bay's offensive guys, but I have them ranked at 29 and 27. They both are being started in roughly 20% of their leagues. ECR on them is 33 and 31. Going up against the New York Giants, not a smash matchup, but not an impossible matchup either. They look to be the two best receiving options there. So I like them this week. The experts like them this week. Give them your trust as high-end flex options or high-end wide receiver threes. Then for Christian Kirk, I have him at 13th. The ECR on him is 14th. I forgot to write down the starting percentage, but it was fairly low, maybe in the high 60s or something like that. Going up against Houston here, I think it's going to be a pretty good week for that offense in Jacksonville, which is why I'm concerned about Dameon Pierce for Houston. But regardless, just trust your Christian Kirk. He is a must start. I find it very hard to imagine you have two better options at wide receiver than him. Trust the experts. Trust me. Go with Christian Kirk. Then in the scraps portion here, I have Garrett Wilson ranked 43rd. ECR on him is 34, so I'm 9 spots too low on him, or lower than the ECR. Going up against Miami, it's a high upside matchup. I just think that Corey Davis and Elijah Moore are going to be, at least initially here, Zach Wilson's number 1 and number 2 targets. As far as fantasy goes, at least for Elijah Moore, because of the big play upside for him. And so far in week 1, that proved to be true. So there was nothing to change my opinion on that opinion from prior to last week. So sticking with that, and have Garrett Wilson as a high-end wide receiver floor, decent flex option in a 3 wide receiver league. Then Juju Smith, I have in at 34-5. That doesn't feel right. Okay, so I had Juju ranked at 39th, so I'm assuming then the ECR was 35. Obviously not a big difference there. I'm 4 spots behind the ECR with Juju Smith-Schuster, but going up against Las Vegas, just pointing out where I have him ranked. He is not a scrap that I'm throwing into the scrap pile. I am sending him gently on top of the scrap pile, still a decent flex option. And my DFS value play is Elijah Moore, because I do think that going up against Miami there could still be a pretty high scoring game, maybe a little bit back and forth even. Miami is not at 100% on the defensive side, a little banged up, and I like Elijah Moore's big play upside there. So he's pretty darn cheap for the potential ceiling. That's it for everything. All of these rankings are up on the website. Get updated. That is www.theFFForge.com. Link down in the description. They will get updated, especially into Sunday morning before I go live, and you can join me for any start-sit questions live on YouTube. You're on YouTube, so you know how to find me on YouTube. All right, thank you very much. Bye.